start at the beginning of the night, which was a fishing vessel called the Saver 10. At 3:39 a.m., her captain, Richard Dale Hartman, raised the Coast Guard station at Bellingham to report something very large and on fire, falling out of a clear summer sky, throwing off sparks, coming down maybe 1,000 to 1,500 yards off Carter Point at the south end of Lummi Island. On its own, that is a meteor report and nothing more. But at 3:41, 2 minutes later, a second call came in, this one from a tugboat named the Dolores, running near Anacortes, roughly 5 miles to the south. Her crew described the same direction in the sky and called it something like lightning, except there were no clouds for lightning to come from. 2 crews, 2 boats, 2 vantage points, 2 minutes apart. That is the part a falling rock can survive. What came next is the part it cannot. The Saver 10 crew went back to the Coast Guard with a correction to their own statement. The object had not simply fallen. It dropped straight down, pulled a U-turn, briefly climbed back the way it came, and then dropped a second time into the water. When it hit, they described a wall of spray rising as high as 100 feet, and then the surface boiled and bubbled for several minutes. When the boat moved in to look, there was no wreckage, no burning fragments, no oil slick, only bubbles where something had gone under. Now watch how fast the official channels emptied. The Coast Guard queried Space Command to see if anything in orbit had decayed and come down there. Negative. Whidbey Island Naval Air Station was asked whether anything had painted their radar at that hour. Nothing. The FAA checked for a downed aircraft. No missing planes, no debris. By mid-morning, county crews had walked the shoreline with radiation detectors and found no radiation either. Every conventional explanation was contacted, and every one of them answered no. And yet the file says meteorite. I will admit that is the detail that stops me cold every time, because a meteorite is precisely the one thing all 4 of those agencies had just finished ruling out. For most of that summer and fall, that was the whole story. A strange splash filed under rock. The reason it did not vanish is that a few local people would not let the paper disappear. A Western Washington University student named Liana Bradshaw wrote it up for the campus magazine Clip Sun, under the title, What Splashed Down Off Lummi Island. A longtime island resident named Doug Phillips quietly preserved a box of material, including the original Coast Guard reports, which a researcher named Matthew Thuney would later call the cornerstone of his reconstruction. Without that box, this is a rumor told twice at a marina and forgotten. With it, it is a documented case. And in late December, the documents stopped being the interesting part because somebody decided to go down and look. December 30, 1984, 5 months on, in the dead of a Pacific Northwest winter, just after a snowstorm, a 58-foot fishing boat called the Diam went out to the coordinates. She was captained by her owner, Dominic Papetti, and named for his daughter, who was aboard that day. Working a depth finder and sonar across the search zone, they found nothing on the first pass. On the second, a target. Papetti described it as roughly 10 feet high and 30 feet across, wedged into the bottom at about a 45-degree angle, and he noticed where it sat. The sea floor there, he said, was unusually flat, almost like asphalt, and the object rested in a shallow depression in it, which is exactly what made it stand out on the return. He also logged something he could not explain. Unmarked aircraft passing overhead during the work that never once made radio contact. If a fishing captain marking aircraft he can't identify over a recovery site is the kind of detail you want kept on the record instead of smoothed off it, then this is the channel that keeps it. And following along is how you stay with the cases that never reach the documentary. Because the next thing that happened is 2 men went into that water. The first diver, John Walker, came up and ruled things out one at a time. Not a boat, not a plane, not rock, not waterlogged wood. He said it was metallic, gold to bronze in color, and shaped like one of the big satellite dishes people had in 1984, the large kind. Not the saucer you bolt to a roof today. He described a lip running around the edge and something like a clasp at one end, and he said when he struck it with his dive knife, it answered like metal. The second diver was Richard Burke, of Emerald Marine Service, and his dive is the center of the whole case. Burke went down through poor visibility and stood on the thing. He called it something like an upside-down teacup with an oval opening, and he noted that after 5 months on the seabed, it carried no marine growth at all. He had brought an underwater camera, and topside, Diane Papetti was watching the live feed come up the cable. She said what she saw looked like a classic flying saucer set into the bay. Then the camera's light burned out, and when the tape was later played back, it was blank. Standing on the object, Burke keyed his radio and said the line that followed this case forever. "I'm standing on the UFO." He also reported a low hum, a vibration coming up through his boots, and the people on the boat said they felt it too, with no other vessel anywhere nearby to blame for it. Burke surfaced too fast and took a serious case of the bends, bleeding from the nose and mouth, and as they treated him, someone noticed a reddish film on his boots that seemed to have come off the object. A sample went to the University of Washington. The analysis never resolved anything, lost to handling and storage before it could say a word. The next morning is the part you can picture exactly. December 31st, a local pilot named Harry Watkinson began his usual run over the area. Watkinson was not a casual witness. He had served in the Navy aboard the carrier Oriskany, directing landings, and he knew both these waters and what a warship looks like from the air. That morning, he counted 3 vessels painted navy grey, 1 large and 2 small, in a place the Navy was simply never seen. On later passes, the big one appeared to anchor, while the 2 smaller ones ran a search pattern, one tracking east to west, the other north to south. When the Diane returned to her coordinates that same day, the target was gone. Nothing on the sounder. Papetti's wife thought she'd glimpsed an NOAA vessel working the site overnight, and island residents around the marinas described the same thing. A ship that came up from the south lingered near the spot and went back south. The crew tried again on January 4 with a commercial color sonar. Within 400 feet of the coordinates, there was no mass at all. Whatever 10-foot object had been wedged into asphalt flat seabed at a 45-degree angle had left no trace it was ever there. So here is what is still hanging. The reddish sample sat in a university lab and never gave an answer. The tape that someone watched live came back empty. The Pentagon, asked directly, denied any knowledge of a recovery, which is the same answer you would get whether it happened or not. And the FOIA trail that a researcher named Dale Gowdy chased has never fully surfaced in public. So the one set of records that could settle it is exactly the set nobody can put on a table. A flaming object maneuvers in a clear sky, enters the water, leaves bubbles but no wreckage. And 5 months later, a metallic, humming, dish-shaped mass is sitting on the bottom right where it went in. And the night after divers touch it, grey ships run a grid and the object is gone. So tell me which story you think you're reading. Is Lummi Island a local fishing crew misreading a sunken piece of junk and talking themselves into a saucer? Or is it the cleanest example we have of something being quietly retrieved from American coastal water while the official file still says meteorite? Put your case in the comments and be specific, because I read them. And if you would rather stand on the sea floor with the divers than be told from shore what they found, you already know which channel to keep close.